Western Mississippi hit with massive and violent tornado strikes. The towns of Silver City and Rolling Fork devastated.
This ain't good, we're in it. We are in the tornado right now.
Wesley Jackson took this video as he drove through the tornado, then captured some of the devastation left in its wake. The tornado's deadly path stretching over 90 miles. Storm chaser Edgar O'Neill was in Rolling Fork.
We saw, complete and utter devastation. Houses gone, gas stations destroyed, trees, power lines blocking entrances everywhere, stray animals, people wandering the street clearly in shock. This was one of the worst we've seen.
First responders searching through the debris looking for any survivors who may still be trapped. In central Mississippi, the storm tearing off roofs as residents ran for cover.
We tried to get ourselves into the middle part of the house, and we did, and we got in there, and obviously it was coming right behind us because as soon as we got in there, we heard a big boom.
Damage from the storm stretching all the way to the eastern part of the state.
And we took a direct hit to the north side of town. We got major damage.
Trees down, homes destroyed. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves has issued a state of emergency in all the counties affected by the severe storms. President Biden releasing a statement saying he and the First Lady are praying for those impacted by these deadly storms and assuring residents, writing, "We will do everything we can to help. We will be there as long as it takes." The president says FEMA has deployed emergency resources to support recovery efforts in the affected areas. Phil Lipoff, ABC News, New York.
We got out, towed the house out, towed my truck out, the car, and the other car, but we good.
We started on search and rescue, and then we went to John Deere and got it opened up. We started bringing injured in out of the rain. We went to the armory and got it opened up for the families to go to that did survive and didn't have hurt and injured people. And started getting ambulances and all into John Deere evacuated. In 58 years, I've never seen anything like this. I've seen tornadoes, but none this bad.
I'm very heavy-hearted at this time. Matter of fact, me and my relative, we was texting at the time when the storm was coming through, and I got to hear his last words.
All of a sudden, just got calm, and then all of a sudden, everything just like a big old train or something coming through, and I just got in the hallway at my house.
People screaming for help and smell of natural gas. Can't get anywhere. It's like a bomb went off. It's total devastation in the areas it's hit. Houses are gone, houses stacked on top of houses with vehicles on top of that.
They were saying that the tornado was coming through Silver City. They were telling you to take cover, but it happened so fast. A lot of people didn't get a chance to take cover.
It was like scary, but I wasn't that scared. I was trying to cover my sister, and it was like a train sound, but it wasn't. It was the tornado coming by. I had to dive in the tub to take cover. It was just scary, but my mom had to hold the door closed. We was all in there. I kind of felt like the tornado just pushing me.
It was scary.
Where were you?
The bathroom. Everybody was in there.
Whose house were you at?
Our mom's.
Okay. How many people were in the bathroom?
Just 4.
Okay. What did it sound like when the tornado was coming through?
Bunch of noise, a lot of dirt and stuff.
And how is your house?
Messed up really bad.
My mom and my dad and my grandmother were in the hallway of this house. That's where they hunker down. There's no windows there, but there's a hallway that goes right there. So all of this glass shot down the hallway and peppered everybody. And they held up a door that hadn't been hung yet. They held up a door in the hallway to try to block some of that. And my mom threw a blanket over my grandmother and held it down to keep the glass off of them. But that's where they They wrote it out and they made it. Everything else around them's gone.
It's kind of a lifestyle, you know. Yesterday was yesterday, and that's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Tomorrow's not here yet, so I don't have any control of it. Here I am today.
Elsewhere around the country, a bleak picture. Devastating tornadoes tore through parts of the South. One twister hit Mississippi, causing widespread damage and leaving dozens dead. CBS 2's Alicia Reed is in our newsroom now with details. Alicia?
Jessica, at least 26 people have died since that tornado hit last night, and that number could continue to rise as first responders sort through the rubble.
Death and destruction in western Mississippi, Alabama, and towns across the region.
That was my nephew that passed away.
Neighborhoods are now flattened, trailers tossed around like toys. The National Weather Service says the twister possibly covered miles of landscape for more than an hour.
We lost everything, but we got our life.
It was scary.
Families described their fear as the tornado passed through.
My mom had to hold the door closed. We was all in there. I kind of felt like the tornado just pushing me and pulling.
All of a sudden, everything just like a big old train or something coming through.
A state of emergency has been declared in all counties affected by the tornado. Help is also on the way from New York. ICNA Relief USA will have a team on the ground Sunday to provide disaster relief for survivors.
Debris cleanup, chainsaw work, providing perhaps some meals and non-perishable food items to the survivors, and to maybe to the shelters that are set up, whatever things they might need, hygiene kits, those type of things.
President Biden says he has been in contact with FEMA and emergency response has been deployed to Mississippi. In the newsroom, Alicia Reed, CBS 2 News.
Alicia, thank you.
As we come on the air, a massive cleanup operation is underway in parts of the Deep South. More than 24 people are dead, several missing from powerful tornadoes that ripped through Mississippi and Alabama. That weather system is now moving into the Northeast. The twister striking after dark, the night sky lit up by bursting transformers and lightning. Storm chasers joining residents and first responders, combing through the rubble of homes. Looking at the devastation, one Mississippi resident said, "There's nothing left." Homes and businesses ripped to shreds, the roof of this restaurant torn off, tables and chairs, and much of the inside left intact. At least 12 tornadoes reported, cars and even tractor trailers sent flying. A water tower crumbled to the ground. Mississippi's governor declaring a state of emergency. And DHS Secretary Mayorkas offering assistance to the communities impacted. ABC's Phil Lipoff leads us off.
Tonight, the deadly tornado emergency unfolding just after dark.
Is there a big tornado, big wedge?
AccuWeather capturing that monster twister in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, northwest of Jackson. Almost impossible to see. Illuminated by transformer power flashes and lightning, that twister on the ground for more than 90 miles. And southeast of Tupelo, another tornado emergency. The radar revealing a dire situation as the twister closed in.
Oh, man. Like north side of Amory, this is coming in. Oh, man. Dear Jesus, please help them.
Hey, y'all need help over there?
Back in Rolling Fork, storm chasers joining first responders and residents in a race to help the injured.
Anybody need help over here?
Tragically, not everyone survived.
That is very disturbing, like actually seeing people losing their lives over a bad weather like this.
More than 24 people losing their lives across the storm zone. Our Rob Marciano is in Rolling Fork.
They've been working all night long, searching and rescuing people here in the town of Rolling Fork. You can see they've even brought in heavy equipment because some of the debris is so compact.
First light revealing devastating scenes, trucks thrown into piles of wreckage, homes and trees all uprooted.
Now that the sun is getting higher in the sky, you're getting a real sense for just how much this town has been leveled. Some of these buildings you can't even make out. This is some sort of industrial building, completely flat.
Mississippi's governor declaring a state of emergency. Survivors now facing the death and destruction left behind. Dana Dew says she and her husband lost everything, describing how he sprang into action as the tornado closed in.
He jumped up out of the bed, and I jumped up out of the bed, and he threw me in the closet and held on to me, and we rode it out.
And tonight, we're learning more about some of the lives lost there. Among them, Mary Barfield Bush, a grandmother, her niece sharing with ABC. Mary was a sweet and caring soul with a beautiful smile that lit up the room. Phil Lipoff, ABC News.
At least 13 people have died after a magnitude 6.5 earthquake struck northern Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan. The epicenter was in the Hindu Kush Mountains near the northern Afghan province of Badakhshan. People in Kabul were outdoors when the quake hit because they were celebrating the Persian New Year. Many chose to spend the night outdoors. At least 9 people died in Pakistan, where hospitals were placed on high alert. We're going to go live to Asad Beg, who's joining us now from Lahore. We just saw some of the pictures there during the earthquake. You felt the earthquake where you are. What's it been like?
Well, yes, we did feel the earthquake. We were in our hotel rooms and the hotel began to shake. So we made our way outside and we were met with many people out on the streets here in Lahore. Many people saying that they didn't feel safe, especially on considering recent events in Turkey. So people were out on the streets, and later images emerged of people across the country, not only here but in Islamabad and even Peshawar, around 530 kilometers away, out on the streets filming their buildings, some with cracks in those buildings, but generally there hasn't really been that much destruction.
I mentioned before that there were at least 13 people been confirmed as having died. Do we have any more reports on casualties and people who might have been killed?
So around northwest of where we are here in Lahore, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, now we've heard that at least 150 people have been injured there and 9 people died when some buildings collapsed. Other people were injured from falling walls and so forth. So the injuries haven't been that much, but what we have heard is that there have been landslides that have cut off roads in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also in Gilgit in Baltistan. Now authorities say that those landslides have caused those roads to be cut off, so it will take some time to get to some of those remote villages. Now we've also heard from Afghanistan where that earthquake originated, and we've heard that some of those villages are very remote with no phone or internet connection, so it will take some time to get access to those areas to really get a real idea in terms of the extent of the damage that this earthquake has caused.
We can see the traffic on the streets behind you. What is the mood there now? I mean, I've only been through a very minor earthquake and that was unsettling enough. What's it like?
Well, this morning it seems like business as usual, but when you speak to people here, they have been on social media, and even before this earthquake there had been some predictions that this region would face an earthquake, so that was on people's minds. But also, if you take into account the events of Turkey and people have seen the destruction there was this considerable fear amongst people, even now when you speak to them. But also there was an earthquake back in 2005 in Pakistani-administered Kashmir where around 87,000 people died, and that's still at the forefront of people's minds. So there is this sense of fear. Is this a one-off? Will there be aftershocks? Will there be further earthquakes? So when you speak to people, they are scared. But even last night in some areas there was some considerable panic after that earthquake. But right here in Lahore, right now in Lahore, it is business as usual this morning, but questions still remain in terms of people wondering if there are more to follow.
Asad, thank you very much indeed. That's Asad Beg joining us from Lahore.
A tiny dot moving at nearly 8 kilometers a second. This asteroid won't hit Earth, but it will come really close. Asteroid 2023 DZ2 was discovered in February by astronomers in the Canary Islands in Spain. It's 50 to 100 meters across, big enough to cause significant damage to a city, and bigger than the meteor that broke apart in the skies over Russia in 2013.
The next 2 nights, when we could recover and then follow up these objects, an orbit came up, and we did realize that it's something serious. If that object would have come 19 hours later, then probably in 3 years from now, we would really had an impact. But thanks to the new observing and some so-called pre-recovery data by 2 American surveys, now it's eliminated from the list.
DZ2 is one of thousands of rocks in the International Astronomical Union's catalog of minor planets. You can see it here, its orbit intersecting with Earth's right there. Now that means it also joins NASA's Sentry program, which is an automated system that keeps an eye on all the known objects in orbit over the next 100 years. DZ2 is not a threat, and in fact, none of the objects in this catalog are. At the moment, there are no known asteroids that pose known threats to the planet Earth. There are more than 1 million known asteroids, from kilometers to meters in diameter. Most orbit between Mars and Jupiter.
We have new systems coming online. Again, an example is an American one called the Atlas system, which has a very wide field of view and scans the sky rather quickly compared to the old-fashioned surveys. There are more and more of, professional and amateur astronomers alike that use bigger and bigger telescopes, and they just discover objects in addition to these professional surveys.
Asteroids are rich targets for scientists. It has long been thought that they may carry complex chemicals formed in the quiet darkness of deep space. And just this month, Japanese scientists found evidence for that in the dust that was collected from the asteroid Ryugu and returned to Earth. It contained uracil, a building block of RNA, one of the molecules essential for life on Earth. Astronomers use these near misses by asteroids to improve their abilities to spot the small rocks that could one day pose a threat to our planet. Colin Baker, Al Jazeera.
Moving on to other news now, and another 8 cases of Marburg virus have been confirmed by the World Health Organization in Equatorial Guinea. That brings the total number of cases in the country to 9 since an outbreak was first declared in February. At least 5 people have also died of the disease in Tanzania. The cases were confirmed in new regions of the country, indicating a wider outbreak. There are no vaccines or antiviral treatments approved to treat the severe viral fever, and that's fueling fears it could spread further in the region, with alarms sounding in Cameroon and Kenya. The Marburg virus disease, or MVD, is a rare hemorrhagic fever. It affects both people and non-human primates. It's in the same virus family as Ebola. Marburg has an average fatality rate of 50%, which varies in different strains. In the worst outbreak in Angola in 2005, the fatality rate was 88%. It killed more than 300 people. Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa. She's joining us from Brazzaville, Congo. Dr. Moeti, thank you very much for your time. The areas that are reporting cases in Equatorial Guinea are about 150 kilometers apart. Does that mean that there are a lot more cases than what's been confirmed?
Yes, first, thank you very much for having invited me to join you and share information about this Marburg disease virus. Yes, indeed. From the area concerned, we are concerned it's suggestive of the fact that there could be more cases. It's spread over quite a wide geographic area. And as you know, there have been 9 cases that have been laboratory confirmed and 20 probable cases. So the investigation is still going on. The testing and confirmation are still going on of these cases.
So the number of cases so far are low, but we know that it has a very high fatality rate. What does Equatorial Guinea and Tanzania need to do to scale up the efforts to stop the chain of transmission here?
Yes. First and foremost, we need to intensify the epidemiological surveillance, so quickly confirming contacts of cases themselves. And the most important thing to do, of course, is to stop the transmission of the virus. The virus is transmitted in body fluids, so blood, sweat, saliva, other body fluids. So what is very important is, first of all, for healthcare workers, who are some of the first contacts, and we have had a couple of healthcare workers die in Equatorial Guinea, to make sure that they are aware of all the precautions, even as they do their clinical care of people and investigations of the disease. They have the knowledge that they need, and they have the equipments that they need. So personal protection equipment, gloves, masks, and so forth, to stop them being infected. And then very importantly, at the same time as we are understanding further, confirming the cases, isolating the cases to make sure that we minimize contact with other people. People in the community, in the families, have to be aware of the risk of the presence of this virus in their midst, and of the precautions that they have to take in order to minimize being infected. One of the key ways of transmitting these viruses is, of course, when somebody dies, as happened both in Tanzania and in Equatorial Guinea, and then the types of processes that are gone through to mourn somebody, to the burials. So if burials happen at the community, it's very dangerous, and that's often also a way for the virus to spread. We need to have safe burials carried out. We have partners, including non-organizations, who take action to be connected to communities. First of all, to persuade them. We need to convince people, this way of saying goodbye to your loved one is not going to be the normal way. Accept this because of the risk and find ways to help them to do it safely. And very importantly, really,
it sounds like some of the challenges are those that we faced when there was an outbreak of Ebola. Equatorial Guinea is not far from the countries that were affected by Ebola. Has Ebola equipped countries around there to deal with such viruses? And again, this virus is from the same family as Ebola.
Yes. I think the Ebola outbreaks, both the ones in West Africa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and most recently in Uganda, have equipped both the countries affected and the neighboring countries, because we always institute a preparedness process, investment by the governments, by the people in being prepared for these outbreaks. That, in a way, helps us to understand that even if we take the outbreak in Tanzania, it's in an area which borders quite closely to Uganda, to Rwanda, and to Burundi. But those countries were already, to some degree, prepared to deal with the outbreak in Uganda. That does help. We have to progressively build up these systems so that we're not starting from scratch each time. And one of the most important aspects of this is really the population's understanding, communities' understanding, and the role that they can play. Because at the end of the day, our health systems don't penetrate the communities to the degree that we can do without their own triggers of suspicion and recall of this is what we were told we needed to be careful about. That needs to be reinforced, of course. We need community health contact with the population so people are reminded and enabled to minimize the transmission.
Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa, we thank you very much for your time on this.
Thank you.
The US has played down an announcement by Russian President Vladimir Putin that he'll place tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. Putin said he struck a deal with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko that doesn't violate non-proliferation agreements. But the US Department of Defense says it sees no reason to adjust its own strategic nuclear posture, and there's no indication Russia is preparing to use a nuclear weapon.
Alexander Lukashenko is right. He said, listen, we're your closest allies. Why do the Americans deploy the nuclear weapons at their allies, on their territory, train the crews, pilots, how to use this type of weapon if needed? We agreed that we'll do the same without violating our obligations. I emphasize, without violating our international obligations on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons.
So let's bring in Miles Pomper. He's a senior fellow at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Miles, good to have you with us. So look, Putin says this move would not violate nuclear non-proliferation treaties. He says it's the same as the U.S. stationing its weapons in Europe. Is Putin right?
Yes, he is. It will not violate the nuclear non-proliferation treaty because Russia, like the United States with its NATO allies, will retain the nuclear weapons within its own arsenal, under its own military command until the time of war. So it does not violate the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. However, it does violate a statement that President Putin made only 4 days ago with President Xi that countries should not station nuclear weapons abroad. So within 4 days, he's changed his mind, apparently.
And Miles, the US says it doesn't believe Russia is preparing to use nuclear weapons. It sees no reason to change what it calls its strategic nuclear posture. Is this Washington saying, look, we can play this game too, but we're not going to escalate this development?
Well, I think the U.S. is accurate in the sense that this doesn't really change the military situation. Russia could use weapons from its own territory, including Kaliningrad, which is a Russian outpost very close to Europe on the other side of Lithuania. And so this doesn't really change their options. This has more to do with politics, both domestic and international, in terms of trying to scare people in Europe, especially in countries like Germany, and in terms of telling the Russian public that they found some way to use Russian nuclear weapons. What it really says to me is Russia's losing the war in Ukraine, and Putin's trying to change the subject.
Is this move then by Putin also meant, as you say there, to rattle European nerves? I mean, how worried will countries like Germany, Italy and Turkey be as US nuclear weapons are deployed on their territory?
Well, there'll certainly be some countries that will get nervous about it. This is why they do it. There's always an active movement in countries like Germany against nuclear issues, nuclear weapons, and they know that's something they can use to try to divide the alliance. I don't think it'll succeed in that endeavor. The alliance has really held together well during the Ukraine war, but this is a traditional tactic of the Russian government, and they're just employing it again.
Miles, just a final thought on nuclear command and control. If and when Russia does deploy nuclear weapons to Belarus, how safe would they be, and who would actually be in control of them? Who has the finger on the button, as it were?
Russia would still have the finger on the button. It would be under the control of the 12th Guma, which is the nuclear force in Russia, in charge of all their nuclear weapons. They would be building the bunker that these weapons are supposed to go in. And right now, it should be clear, the Russians are not actually going to move any weapons, at least until July. In Putin's announcement, he said they would build a bunker to house the weapons. So this is an announcement for the future if it happens, but it's more about saber-rattling, in my view.
Miles Pomper, really good to get your thoughts and your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you, Miles.
Thank you.
China's President Xi Jinping has left Moscow after 2 days of talks with President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders issued a joint statement on Tuesday calling for responsible dialogue to end the war in Ukraine. Putin says Beijing's proposals to end the conflict could be used as the basis for a peace settlement, but that Kyiv and the West do not appear willing to resolve the situation. Let's bring in journalist Yulia Shapovalova from Moscow. Yulia, how much has President Putin actually got out of this meeting?
Well, I think he has to be pretty much satisfied. So many vitally important issues have been addressed during the meetings. The Ukrainian conflict, as you said, economy, trade, energy. He praised Beijing's, of course, proposals for a peaceful settlement of the crisis in Ukraine. He said the plan can be taken as a basis for further agreements. Many, actually, statements of the plan coincide with Russia's approaches. Putin spoke about the growing trade ties between the two countries. Trade turnover between Russia and China has grown 116% in the course of 10 years. China is Russia's leading foreign trade partner, as we know. And also, the leaders signed statements on deepening relations of partnership and strategic cooperation between the countries and a plan for the development of key areas of Russian-Chinese economic cooperation until 2030. What is also important, according to Mr. Putin, the Russian Federation is ready to switch to the yuan and trade with other countries, not just for Russia and China. Yuan payments will be in place for Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa and Latin America. According to Putin, Russia will increase food supplies to the Chinese market, There will be exports of meat, grain and other agricultural produce. Regarding energy, Russia remains a strategic supplier of oil, natural gas, including LNG, coal and electricity to China. The leaders discussed also the construction of the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline, which will pass through Mongolia. So a plethora of issues which will have massive future impact here.
Yulia, thank you very much indeed. Yulia Shapovalova from Moscow. We're going to bring in Katrina Yu. She's joining us now from Beijing. There's been a lot of speculation in the media following this two-day meeting that essentially Russia needs China more than China needs Russia. What has China gained from this meeting?
Well, I think China is sending the message very clearly that despite the consternation from the US and its Western allies, that China is continuing to move forward and deepen its relationship with Moscow. Beijing described this relationship as at its highest level ever, and basically this relationship is here to stay despite Russia moving forward with its invasion of Ukraine. Now, we had two documents released, joint statements released from Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. The first was really looking at strategic cooperation. The two countries say that this is not a political or military alliance, but they do seem to very much share this worldview that they are against a US-led world order. And to that end, they said that there would be more cooperation through the blocks such as SEO, the Belt and Road Infrastructure Project, and through the BRICS group as well. But at the same time, they also criticized NATO and the AUKUS plan. And then the second document was about deepening economic cooperation, especially in the areas of agriculture and energy. And in return, Beijing gets cheap oil and gas, and it provides Russia with a crucial economic lifeline at a time when the country is struggling with sanctions from the West. Now, I think there's two things really mainly that Beijing has achieved here. And one is that Xi Jinping has quite successfully, I think, used this visit as a platform to promote China's peace plan. Now, Putin said himself that they would discuss this, and both sides during this meeting said they would both wanted to promote dialogue to prevent this conflict in Ukraine from escalating. Now, it's clear that there was no concrete outcome in terms of improving the situation in Ukraine, but what matters to Beijing is that Xi Jinping at least appeared to be a global statesman and peacemaker during this trip. And the second thing that Beijing has achieved, well, it really is the optics. And the optics were that this is a strong China supporting and propping up a weak Russia. And it does really seem that Putin was the junior partner here, needing Xi Jinping. Now, we didn't see China crossing any red lines, offering, for example, military support to Russia. China still very much needs to preserve the health of its relationship, especially economically, with the EU. But at the same time, we did see China supporting Vladimir Putin, throwing his weight behind Vladimir Putin, and needing Russia to stay strong no matter how the Ukraine war ends. And this is because China desperately needs Russia not to fail and Putin to remain in power for this increasing confrontation that it finds itself in. It's increasing tensions against the United States. It needs Moscow to be strong and back there in its corner as that situation with the US seems to be getting worse.
It's Katrina Yu bringing us up to date from Beijing. Katrina, thank you very much indeed.